Hello, and welcome to the seventh episode of the Javid Podcast. Today, my guest is Sergey Jakimov. He is venture capitalist, a serial entrepreneur. He started three ventures and raised three deep tech ventures, and he raised actually $40 million in VC funding for his own ventures. He started a VC fund called Bunch VC, if I'm pronouncing correctly, and which invests in early
Almost,
stage biotech
almost.
companies with a special focus on longevity sector. What's the sorry,
Almost.
what?
It's longevity. What? It's longevity. You almost did it
Lo-
correctly.
okay. Oh, my bad. Longevity. And he also, I'm guessing in his free time, he also lecture at universities and teaching courses on venture capital and the intellectual property rights. You do a lot. It's just a very brief introduction, and I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself and tell us about your own background in your own words.
Sure, absolutely. So happy to be here, first and foremost. My name is Sergey. I do wear multiple hats. As of now, I am one of the co-founders and one of three managing partners for Longevity, which is our early stage investment vehicle in the longevity space. Originally, I do come from educationally. Let's start with the educational background. So I do not come from the biotech background originally. So my education, my BA was in international relations. My first MA was in quantitative methods. I mean, it was political science, technically speaking, but it was quantitative methods, so statistics, really. And then my second MA was in law and finance, financial law. So by education, as you see, it's more numbers and law rather than biotech really. So I ended up in biotech by being a founder. So since I've co-founded my first company when I was 22, that was an engineering company, and the reason for doing so was I was tremendously disappointed in being employed in any of the institutions that would like to employ me back in the days when I was pretty much, I was not a teenager anymore, right? But I was still a very young guy. And I
Yeah.
was absolutely disappointed in the governmental sector, for that matter. So I did not want to work there, which would be
Okay.
like a good fit. I did not want to pursue any of the offers that the Big Four gave me back in the days after my first MA. So I was really interested in how do you commercialize science, right? So heavy IP commercialization and like how do you make a product out of something patented, and how you commercialize it and how you make it sell in the industry. This was something that fascinated me. And this is what really we tried to do, right? So we started together with my other partner. We started a company in engineering back in the days. It was a company in oil and gas. So it was a company that was essentially selling computational fluid dynamics services, CFD modeling services to oil and gas operators. Essentially, what we did was we modeled the behavior of fluids in the closed environments, right? So in transport, in tanks, in pipes, whatever. Now, that was all fun. But the ultimate goal for me was always to end up in the life sciences from the medical angle, and the reason for that was pursuing sort of the the whole quant methods and political science field was actually my second choice. My first choice was being a neurosurgeon back in the day, so I actually wanted to end up in medicine from the very beginning, but
Wow.
I didn't have the resource. I grew up in a very small town. I didn't have any financial capacity, for that matter, to actually get this education straight away. So I decided, well, I might pursue it as a founder, right? So my second company was in medical devices, and uh, this is where we were active in the field of bioactive coatings, and we were one of the first to the market who introduced kind of the concept of drug eluting coating or drug delivery coating, which we have created on the surface of various types of orthopedic implants and implants for reconstructive surgery. So hip replacements, knee replacements, dental implants as well, all the reconstructive plates and everything. So that was that. after doing this one, I thought, well, it's time. Medical devices are still not pharma, so it's time to end up in pharma. I did not start any company straight away, although it was tempting. But I rather started joining other entities. So I essentially joined as an entrepreneur in residence or non-executive director. And I joined teams that were doing their preclinical work, essentially early stage pharma startups, in fields of age-related diseases, where my most interest was in oncology, neurodegeneration, and cardiovascular. So when I spent like 3.5 years doing that, and really, yeah, I mean, this was my ultimate immersion into the age-related disease space. I ended up where I wanted to end up originally, but from the founder's angle, kind of from the fundraiser angle. So we spent a bit more than 3 years doing that. Again, raised I think north of 60 million or so for a bunch of companies, and kind of helped them to get their clinical strategies together. Then I met Gary, actually, so who's now my partner in the fund, and we built another company together, which is called Longenesis. So that one was a software as a service take for study sponsors, aka Big Pharma. Big Pharma is normally a study sponsor, to identify patients faster for recruitment purposes and for clinical research purposes. So we ended up creating essentially like a closed loop ecosystem where pharma was able to find patients based on anonymized metadata that we were able to scrape from different clinical institutions around continents, pretty much like around certain areas around the globe. And it was non-invasive for institutions, so we essentially figured out a way of how to take the data out with leaving the actual data source inside the hospital. So we figured out how to use anonymized metadata for patient identification. So we created a compliant way of finding patients, and then we kind of topped it off with another piece of software that enabled electronic consent management, patient onboarding into trials, etc. So we kind of created like a closed loop ecosystem where study sponsors were able to find patients and then get them into the trials. So that company still exists, is doing well. It's actually now included. We included the portfolio of the first fund, now Longevity One. So I think the biggest client of that company is now the government of UAE. So it's pretty big in Middle East and Europe as we speak. And then the fund came, right? And then the Longevity One came, and I'm referring to it as Longevity One because we're now gearing up towards the second fund, which I'm not able to talk a lot about as of now, right? But the first fund is kind of nearing the end of its investment lifetime, so we will soon properly announce the second vehicle. But yeah, rewind back to 2021. We started Longevity One, and Longevity One was really started by 3 partners, and it was a very organic effort. I mean, it was a very calculated effort because throughout the years in pharma, we accumulated we kind of had 2 things that a good venture fund should have when we're talking about life sciences and biotech. And longevity is still life sciences anyway. And these 2 things are a deal access, right? So we had access to pretty much all the major. That's a funny effect that when you do a thumbs up. We had deal access to pretty much all the major research institutions out there. So we had access to Harvard, Stanford, Yale's of the world.
Yeah.
And we had relationships with the much larger VCs that were sharing deals with us and kind of inviting us in allocations. So we had access to allocations, really, right? And then the ability to kind of pick from the best deals out there. On the one hand, but then on the other hand, we were able to put together what is now, I think, the most notable scientific advisory board in our industry, right? So starting from big names like Mike Levitt, a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry out of Stanford, ending up with very specific longevity KOLs such as Matt Haberlein and Tom Randall, etc. And pharmacy level executives. We kind of were able, because of our work with all these people before, and the chair of our scientific advisory board is Alex Javronkov, who is pretty much the person who has created the AI for drug discovery space within silico medicine, right? So we were able to do these two things,
Can you repeat the
and
name
this is
again?
how. So Alex, the name of the chair of our advisory board is Alex Javronkov. So he's the CEO and co-founder
Oh,
of
from the
the company, which is called uh,
in
yeah,
silico.
in silico medicine. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, we were kind of able to put
Mm-hmm.
these two critical components together, and here we are. That's the background. This is how I ended up in the life sciences. And you've mentioned, I mean, teaching and everything, but it's more of a good hobby. So I do work as a faculty, as a visiting
Yeah.
faculty in a couple of in a couple of institutions. But I mean, to be fair, I started teaching when I was 25, I think, or 26, and I'm 32 now. So it's not like a very recent development.
Mm.
But yeah, I still do
Mm.
it. It is a great headhunting tool. And it is and I also feel that the venture capital angle is still underexplored in a lot of university curriculums. So and it should be explored, because most of the innovation that you are using now, like even
Mm.
this is really venture backed, right? So even an iPhone you're using has more than 100 patents that were once venture funded. So that's that. That's the whole background.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Sergey. It was very informative. You actually covered some of my questions already, but you also gave me a chance to ask new questions. And
Sure.
there's a bit of a lag, and also it freezes occasionally, so I might ask you to repeat yourself sometimes. So I apologize for that. It's just the internet connection, I guess. But one of the things that from what you said to me was I'm curious about is that I'm guessing you started your first company in Latvia, right?
Correct. Yeah. I was out of Latvia.
Yeah. So, and you said you started that company in more like oil and gas sector, more like a tech company. And so, what was the like the raising fund? Because usually when we talk about VC funding, we look at the United States or United Kingdom, more like, especially before it was more like a those countries, and now it's spreading around too. So how challenging it was like raising a funding, and also how did you adapt and also kind of adjust your background, because not you didn't come from like a CS background or like tech science tech background. How do you adapt your background to get into something so novel for yourself?
Good question. So on the fundraising side, uh, I will not provide you with any groundbreaking insights, to be completely honest with you. So it was hard. The answer is it was hard, because
Mm.
the fundraising environment was not anything near Silicon Valley in Latvia 10 years ago, as you might imagine. B, the industry
Yeah.
itself was not very VC friendly. Like, I mean, it was not software
Mm.
per se, right? It was a very unusual sector for VCs to catch all VCs at least to look at.
Mm.
We were able to raise the very
Mm.
first ticket. Oh, and the CEO was 22, which didn't help either. So the first
Yeah.
ticket we've raised was after we actually got the pilot agreement with one of the oil and gas back in the days, one of the oil and gas companies. So the pilot agreement with the first client basically triggered the very first pre-seed ticket in
Mm.
us. So it was really not the situation. Before that, it was all bootstrapped. So it was not really a situation of getting a huge pre-seed before even having an MVP or a rough product idea. This is as it very often happens in software, and now happens in AI, for example, right, where you have these hype cycles when kind of, your barrier to getting funded
Yeah.
significantly lower because of the popular thesis. So that was the fundraising, the fundraising side of it. And the second part of your question was, remind me.
Like I said, how did you, because you didn't come from like a CS or tech
Oh, the background.
background,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like,
right. The
how
background.
did you
Yeah,
adjust your background
that
to get into something?
that slipped through. So
Yeah.
look, I am risking sounding a bit, again, Silicon Valley-ish here, which I do not want to. But I do really think that way. And here's the thing. I think that deep tech companies are, I wouldn't say they're all built the same, but really like the pattern of building one is kind of similar. And it
Hmm.
doesn't really differ in terms of which sector you're playing in. So that's the first part. Now, the second part is I also think that when you have skin in the game, um, it will take you, assuming that you do not know much about the industry, it will take you around half a year of research, sometimes even less, to understand what sort of people you need to surround yourself with in the team to be able to cover for very basic needs in terms of the team functionality and competencies inside the organization. So the third, I also think that identifying a bottleneck in a specific industry is actually not that hard. It does require talking to, max 10 professionals from the field that are actually willing to have an open conversation with you and share. And this is how you can find your, niche. If you're specifically interested in that industry, this is how you can find your niche and kind of try to use it as a springboard. Again, I'm not talking any groundbreaking stuff here, to be completely honest with you. But I do really think that in order to basically learn a new field, is half a year tops, if you are capable of learning at all as a human being. And it doesn't really require you to get a PhD in the space, but it will give you a basic understanding of what sort of competencies you need around you, in order to try building an MVP. So it's not an educational background game, okay? Like it really is not. It's more of um, assembling, an organic collective of people around you that know their fields and know specific sectors of the field you are holistically interested in. But that's my opinion. Might be wrong.
I see. Um, I fair answers, and I appreciate that. But okay, let me switch it up a bit and ask a similar question, but more focused on like biotech stuff, right? Because I've talked to a couple
Hmm.
of VCs and I've talked to a couple of people in the field, and usually they're like, yeah, you need like a PhD or MD because it's like highly specialized, or not even that. Sometimes it's like you just because for the investors to like give you kind of credibility, they like want to see like PhDs and MD degrees and whatever. So do you think do you agree with that, or do you think there are ways to work around it, and how do you navigate that, especially when it comes to biotech and life science kind of investing and entrepreneurship? How do you navigate that yourself?
Okay, I'll be honest with you here. So, as a fund, when you're looking at the company pragmatically as a fund, you are looking at the track record of founders. And of course, the educational background of founders actually helps, right? So if you see that the person has a PhD out of Johns Hopkins or Harvard, or an MD out of Harvard or Yale or any other, reputable institution, um, that helps. But if you like the thesis, and if you like the science, or if you like the take the company has on a specific issue, and the focus the company has, and the whole, their ability to essentially define who they want to be when they grow up, quote unquote, you will take the call with the company, and you will see how the team actually behaves, and you will talk to the founder. And if you have built the companies before, you will immediately feel whether the person is competent enough or not. And this is where the PhD does not really make a huge difference. This is where the actual ability of the person to learn and to to absorb information matters. I've seen equally successful teams with top-notch scientific backgrounds and teams that were seemingly out of place when you look at their educational background, but when you look at how they execute and how deep they actually know their field, you would really, I mean, if you don't know where they're coming from, you would assume that they have all the degrees in that specific discipline that are available to humankind. All right, so it does really depend. It helps in terms of the optics. I would not say that, like, if we're talking scientific teams, so if we're talking the technical component of the team, right? So the CSO, and then the science part, yeah, that should be specialized, obviously, right? Because that's just the way it is. But if we're talking founder CEO, not necessarily. I'll give you an example. So we don't. So as a fund, we rarely get random people as founders, right? So the companies we're looking at, they're mostly built by former pharma people or ex-founders in the space or something like that. So they know their stuff already. But the founders are very often business degrees, right? So they are business degrees. They are former investment bankers that were working in life sciences, and they were closing deals in the life sciences, but they have nothing to do with biology, or any other life sciences specific disciplines for that matter. So it depends. It helps, but it's not detrimental if the founder doesn't have a degree. That would be a very unfair way of looking at things.
That actually ties well to one of the questions down the list that I have, but I still want to ask that because you already mentioned, you're a partner at Longevity, which is a VC firm that invests in early stage biotech and longevity focused companies. I guess my question would be like, what philosophy guides your investment decisions? And giving that early investments, as you mentioned, often hinge on the idea of the team and idea. How do you determine which companies to support, and what differentiates companies that successfully secure funding from those that don't?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, right? So because every let me start with this. So whenever a VC tells you that there is a formula of, like, this is what the company should be for it to be successful, it is not true. Every VC still there is this fundamental concept in economics which is called bounded rationality. So every VC still invests according to its own twisted fantasy of how the ideal picture should look like, right? So we all search for slightly different things, to be honest with you, because we have a different image in our heads of what is the ideal case scenario that we want to see. There are some variables that really are shared between all funds, but then in reality, everyone has a slightly different picture. So that's the first part. Now, the second part is, if we talk about longevity specifically, this is where you need to understand that VCs per se invest in fairly well-defined stuff, which means that everything that has to do with fundamental science only, or very holistic scientific theses of we're going to make people younger, for example, is not VC territory. And the reason for that is focus. There is no specific disease domain. There is no specific therapeutic program. You cannot really fund it, right? Because as a fund, you do not understand, like, where do you enter, what sort of value do you bring, and how this value will increase down the line for you to exit with a multiplier, if you are looking at it pretty pragmatically, right? So the first part of my answer is we invest in companies that have, again, as cliche as it sounds, that have a broad vision of the underlying technology, where this technology can be, for example, epigenetic reprogramming or senescent cell clearance, right? So senescent cells, which is a longevity, two of which are, I mean, both are longevity specific theses. But we would only invest in that company if the founding team actually understands what it takes to prove that the underlying technological base or the underlying platform works. So we would not only invest in a platform, we would invest in a company that actually has defined therapeutic programs, defined timelines, and essentially defined steps of how to get there in order to prove their worth in specific disease domains. So if we're talking, let's say, senescent cell company, which is a broad claim, senescent cell clearance, we would only look at the company that says we are a senescent cell company and we have figured out how to apply it in dermatology, for example, for specific skin conditions. And this is the therapeutic program we're pursuing, and these would be the endpoints that we're going to measure. And this would be our first application, right? Great. This is something that fits. We are studying senescent cells, and this is going to change, the aging landscape of humanity. Full stop. We're not going to fund. So that's the first part. And then the second part of my lengthy answer is there are pretty standard checklists, to be completely honest with you, right? So, and that is, we look at the origin of technology. So where does it come from? We do look at the composition of the team, which means that we never engage in science-only teams. We always look for the entrepreneurial component or the entrepreneurial background on the team. So there should be a balance between someone who talks to the market and someone who actually does the technology stuff. There always, even in the super early stage, there should always be someone that handles business matters. IP, obviously, and the mode of ownership of IP and the freedom to operate of the company, right, is hugely important. And biotech IPs pretty much make it or break it type of factor. So there are these, and then the M&A landscape, right? Whether is pharma looking at this? What has been the appetite historically? What are the competing groups doing? So all of these pretty standard things we also look at. Yeah, that will be the answer.
Okay. First of all, extremely informative. And sorry, sometimes it freezes, so I don't know if you're stopping or you're just still going. So that's why.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah.
Very informative. I think one thing I'm curious about is that when somebody comes up to you with that idea, and obviously it's an early stage company, so there's a high chance of failure. I mean, that's what VC is, right? They don't invest in companies that will always be successful. There's a high chance of failure. But still, is there do you have a team, or do you have like a scientific advisory board that kind of like goes over the idea, kind of validate if it's going to be something feasible? Or because, I mean, even if it comes from like established scientific field, there's still, it's an early stage idea. So there's not much, support for that. So how do you kind of validate the idea of an entrepreneur to be like, okay, this might be feasible or this might not be feasible?
Yeah, so we rarely, good question. So we rarely look at ideas only, right? So we look at the companies, the first fund looks at the preclinical stage companies, which means that they have already done their cell work, so their in vitro work, and they're now in their in vivo stages, right? So our sweet spot of entering is in vivo, which is animal studies, right? So right before the company is preparing to submit the so-called IND package, investigator in new drug package, to the FDA, so that it gets clearance to go into the human trials, right, and raise a proper clinical round. So these are not ideas really, right? So these are early stage biotech type of companies, right? Some of them are more biotech than longevity. Some of them are more longevity than biotech, but doesn't really matter. So they already have teams. They already have prior track record of fundraising, angels or funds already. Some of them already have first indications of interest from big pharma and from essentially major players and institutional partners. So yeah, it's not really like a clean sheet in a way. Then when it comes to the team, we actually do have a pretty big team in the fund. So there are three partners. We have four people on the deal team, where the deal team is actually led out of Stanford. Our deal team lead is a Stanford PhD. On top of it all, we have a separate COO and CFO in the fund. And on top of it all, we also have a fellowship program in Stanford and Berkeley, which is 5 people at any given moment. So the amount of people that are working on the deals operationally is 4 on the deal team, plus the CFO, plus 5 fellows, which roughly amounts to 10, right? And then you have partners that source the deals and et cetera. So it's actually quite a bunch. And then on top of it all, we do have the Scientific Advisory Board. And the Scientific Advisory Board, as I mentioned, is one of the most recognized in the industry. And they are all, it is assembled essentially from KOLs in very specific fields, starting from stem cells, ending up with, pharma, oncology angle, longevity medicine, et cetera, right? AI for drug discovery. And depending on the focus of the company, we actually engage at least 2 scientific advisory board members that's a fun animation as well. At least 2 scientific advisory board members at the later stage of due diligence, when the deal team has already kind of assembled the draft of the investment memo to get final approvals and final sign-offs on science. So it is quite a process. We are known in the industry for being one of the most vigorous science due diligence people. And we really spend 95% of our time in science DD. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
I see. And, we talked a lot about it, but we never really clarified it. And your company, your VC fund, invests in early stage biotech companies, but there's a significant focus on longevity sector, right? Longevity companies. Can you just, for our audience, explain what longevity is? Because I feel like it gets thrown around a lot, but nobody really fully knows what longevity, entails in terms of like the research and the companies and all that.
Yeah, it gets thrown around a lot, and it really depends. It really depends on how you look at things. I mean, us as a VC, we look at longevity pretty pragmatically, to be honest with you. So we look to fund companies that prolong health span, right? So it's health span over lifespan, and we're looking at companies that prolong health span and prolong healthy human performance, right? Now, if you look at the longevity industry holistically, you will find, unfortunately, or fortunately, but rather unfortunately, you'll find a bit of a rivalry. Well, not rivalry, but like a discussion between 2 distinct camps, right? One camp says, let's solve age-related diseases first. So let's solve cancer, let's solve Alzheimer's, let's solve cardiovascular, etc., right? And this is what's gonna add up healthy years to our life. The other camp says, let's solve aging as a holistic process. Like, let's hack aging so that these diseases never appear in the first place, right? Now, as a VC, A, we don't feel there should be a rivalry, right? B, as a VC, we're still towards the first camp, just because when you invest in things, you need to understand how are they increasing in value and how are they proving their worth in the eyes of conventional regulators and in the eyes of kind of the overall pharma framework, really. So as a VC, we kind of invest in 3 major verticals, where the first one is therapeutics, longevity therapeutics, and age-related disease therapeutics. And this is where we spend a lot of time in longevity tech, such as epigenetic reprogramming, senescent cells, etc., But again, I will repeat myself, it should be focused, right? It should actually have like a therapeutic indication
Mm-hmm.
when we look at it. But
Mm-hmm.
we also spend a lot of time in neurodegenerative, in cancer, and your kind of usual suspects that kill people prematurely. Now, the second pillar of ours is what we call early detection and personalized care. So this is how do you catch these diseases early, like essentially stage 0, stage 0.5, and how do you seamlessly personalize therapeutics to improve the response rate of already sick patients. Right. So essentially, how do you tailor the protocols in order to cater for the therapeutic needs of a specific cancer patient, let's say, to maximize the response? So that's you can. I mean, I think the closest example that might ring a bell here is a concept which is called precision oncology. Right. So how, for example, right. So precision oncology is like how do you target the very specific thing? So personalized precision oncology would be a good example of what we'd be looking at, and we have companies like this in the portfolio as well. And then the third pillar of ours is what we call longevity infrastructure. And this is very often overlooked by people that are talking about longevity. And if we're talking like society level, right, the popular longevity level, people don't really know that this exists at all. And this is where the concept is realistically, if you ditch the romance part, in order for us to be able to create more drug candidates with longevity benefits, or with age-related disease benefit, or with any sort of longevity dividend whatsoever, we need to figure out how to create these drugs faster. Because the current processes in pharma, it's 2 years per drug candidate, essentially. All right. So in order to create a molecule candidate for preclinical trials, it's 2 years. So, all the approaches that help us speed up drug discovery, AI for drug discovery, novel methods in sequencing, novel methods in protein sequencing, and proteomics, for example, is a huge interest of ours. All of this gets into the bucket of longevity infrastructure. So anything that essentially speeds up processes when it comes to drug discovery and the infrastructural components of longevity. That's that, really. This is how we look at it.
I see. And you know, so there's been science does follow trends, right? Like you will see a lot of investments in AI or application of AI in biology, drug discovery. You will see a lot of sustainability companies getting funding because it's a huge thing right now. And I feel like lately I've been seeing and hearing a lot about longevity. I feel like more than before. What do you saying is the reason for such a significant gain in momentum when it comes to longevity research? I mean, I'm guessing one reason is partly people want to live longer, but I'm wondering if there are any other reasons for that.
Javid, I mean, longevity is the next mega trend, and the reason why is
Mm,
that as a how do I put it in the most correct manner? As a society, longevity in age-related diseases is really the only thing you should care about. It's your biggest problem to solve, right? And dying from cancer prematurely, or getting Alzheimer's at the age of 60, right? Or deteriorating at the pace which you cannot even imagine being 20-ish years old, I guess, right? This is the biggest problem that you actually need to address. It's not SaaS, corporate SaaS. It's not blockchain. It's not Airbnb for dogs type of projects. I mean, this is all fun, but really, age-related diseases as a phenomenon is something that we cannot solve, and it's something that we um, tend to ignore until it hits us or someone in our families, right? And it's very often overlooked, although it is actually the major thing you should care about. Now, when it comes to this is, and it's my opinion only, right? So disclaimer, this is what I think. Other people might not agree, but when it comes to longevity in general and why is it popular, etc. Let me offer you like three buckets of what longevity really is, right? Or can be. So bucket number one, on like the horizon of events, number one is let's call it um, self self awareness, right? Like social self awareness. People are becoming more and more self aware, more and more wellness oriented. They want to track sleep. They want basic actionable data so that they can adjust their lifestyle, they can adjust their diet, they can adjust their habits, yada yada, right? So the wearable market has changed tremendously, right? So the amount of information that is available for the user, both real-time information
Mhm.
from sensors and then just information somewhere on the internet, is unprecedented. I mean, people are wearing these things now, right? And they tell them how they're sleeping, how they're exercising, whether you should go for a run today or not. So all of that is happening, and I think people are becoming self-aware. So in a way, that's like the first layer, right? So the educational, social, societal layer. Now, the second layer is age-related diseases, right? So this is where a lot of VCs sit, and this is where your time horizon for these to appear in the market and reach the consumer is like 5 to 10 years. And this is where you'll find cancer therapeutics, you'll find all that stuff. And then the third level is like what let's call it visionary longevity, right? And that is where we find you know, things like cryonics, life preservation, organ bioprinting, organ rejuvenation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all the like sci-fi things, or you perceive them as sci-fi, but in reality, they're like 10 years from now, like maybe 15 years from now, and you'll see them appear
Mhm.
pretty much very fast, really. Time flies in biotech specifically. So I think people are just becoming more self-aware. The other I think factor to take into account is that um, biotech industry and longevity industry has learned how to speak human language, right? Because
Mhm.
honestly, if I throw a cell press paper at you in immuno-oncology and you don't have a degree, you won't be interested. And the reason why is that it's just unaccessible, right? Language wise and like the concept wise, it just speaks different language, which you're not prepared to speak. Now, longevity industry has been pretty good in popularizing certain, at least lifestyle things. And you have the examples of Aubrey de Grey, for example. You have examples of Mr. Sinclair. Um, you have examples of Brian Johnson, and like KOLs like this that sometimes serve
Mhm.
a bit of an extreme example, but still like in the popular perception of things, very approachable example of what this can be and like what can you do as a human being to kind of to get into the movement. So I think the whole industry became more approachable, and that's tremendous, right? And that's tremendous, and this is something that we welcome as well, because the more people are interested in it, the more there is awareness. It also comes with a caveat of the more people are interested, the more junk you have as well. So you have a lot of approaches that appear that are not scientifically backed. And all the snake oil salesmen are there immediately. But I think that's the feature of every evolving sector anyway. So that would weed out at some point.
I see. And in your opinion, I mean, I know it's a very vast sector and there's so many focus areas, but what do you think have been like the major? Because you mentioned David Sinclair, there's this female academic scientist, I forgot her name, I apologize, but she recently passed away. She was also huge in the longevity sector. And then there are
Yeah.
several people. What do you think have been the major breakthroughs recently that really drove the momentum? And what do you think are like the main endpoints that are people really focus on when it comes to longevity research?
Yeah, I think this is hugely subjective, to be completely honest with you. I mean, in general terms, I think the major breakthroughs. If you look at one of Aubrey's talks, and I don't want to repeat him, right? You can just take a look.
Yeah.
You can look at one of Aubrey de Grey's talks, and pretty much in every talk he says, well, good news are that in the last 20 years, we haven't discovered anything fundamentally different or fundamentally new about aging. So we can be
Mm.
kind of sure that we sort of know what's happening, right, on the systemic level. You
Hmm.
had, of course, like milestone things that have
Hmm.
shaped, and I think have in a way targeted the industry, made it more consolidated, more focused, and these things are, for example, the landmark paper that first defined the hallmarks of aging, right? That's a good example, where you have these aging hallmarks that cell senescence, et cetera, telomere attrition, and stuff like that. And then you have, of course, the discovery of Yamanaka factors, right? And discovery of factors that basically can rewind the cell back in time, right? So and then again, David Sinclair and his group has done a lot of work where they basically came down to four really Yamanaka factors that can, or rather, they ended up with three. They started with four. They ended up with three that can kind of rewind the cell back into this pluripotent stem cell state without fully erasing cell's identity, right? So technically, that paves the way to rejuvenation, actual rejuvenation of cells, which is of course groundbreaking, right? So things like that. Now, another sector that is emerging and that is of huge importance, and it is almost as huge or even bigger in terms of impact, is longevity medicine, right? And that is a a group of healthcare solutions, rather, like, or like a healthcare paradigm, not services, God forbid, healthcare paradigm, right? That is actually healthcare versus sick care, right? Because the current healthcare systems they're actually sick care, so they're reactive. They're not proactive. They're not geared towards preventing things. They're actually geared towards patching you up when you're broken, right? So the longevity medicine part is actually trying to prevent things from happening, so that we don't have to patch you up, right? And you have in the last few years, really, you have landmark events such as well, okay, a bunch of longevity clinics around the globe, private ones. But for example, the very first public longevity clinic opening in Sheba University Hospital in Tel Aviv, in Israel, right? So public longevity clinic. The other public longevity clinic opening up at the in the Singapore University Hospital, right? So we see longevity medicine actually penetrating traditional healthcare systems and learning how to live with these traditional kind of old school quote unquote healthcare frameworks. And that's also that is a huge breakthrough. You don't see it yet, you don't feel it, as like, it's not like a new iPhone coming out type of event, right? But it's
Yeah.
much more of a systemic paradigm shift into how we approach people, how we treat people, how we prevent things versus just try to fix things. So yes, there are many there are many, I think, many of these events that kind of contribute to the bigger picture. And then again, I will repeat myself. It's just the overall level of awareness and self-awareness of society, where we suddenly don't want to smoke anymore, for example, where it was super fashionable 40 years ago. And smoking is a single worst thing you can do to yourself, longevity wise. Like, this is a single worst habit. Alcohol is not so bad. Like, bad diet is not so bad as smoking, right? So that we are becoming self-aware, and we are a bit less prone to voluntarily kill ourselves with our habits. And that is also a huge paradigm shift, because these things also happen gradually in the societal level, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I cannot dilute it to one event, but rather, a systemic,
Yeah. Yeah.
like a systemic phenomenon.
Yeah, I really like the way you lay out things. It was very nice humor, nice sense of humor. Um, uh, I want to circle back to your, the VC fund and also like your portfolio. Are there any companies that really excite you in your own portfolios that, in terms of like the technologies or the science that are utilized?
Yeah, all of them. I mean, this is the reason why they're in our portfolio. This is
All of them.
they
Yeah,
do excite us, and
that's
this is
fair.
why we have included them. But no, I mean, look, so it's a mix, right? So it's a mix between very and not all of the portfolio that is out there public. We haven't published all the companies we have committed to or we have invested already. So some of these are not announced yet. But yeah, we have people doing groundbreaking things. We have people detecting, ovarian cancer stage 0. We have, a company in epigenetic reprogramming, Turn Bio, which is pretty much the major competitor to Altus Labs, doing great things in dermatology, ophthalmology, cancer. And we have a company in personalized cancer treatment. We have several investments in drug discovery platforms. One of the recent announcements of the fund was one of our recent investments, actually, in the macrocycle space, announcing a deal with Merck worth 220 million in oncology specifically. So
Wow.
yeah, look, so they're all exciting. They're all exciting for what they do, and
Yeah.
as a fund, we now have 14 companies in the portfolio. A couple more unannounced. We will be announcing them as we go. No write-offs as of now. And if you look at the portfolio performance of ours versus kind of the benchmark in the industry, we're way north from the benchmark. So I think so far the heavy science DD is paying off. But look, it's the whole point of doing this is I don't remember who was this quote from. I do remember it was in Forbes. But I don't remember who that was. Who in one of the interviews, and that was a person out of the biotech sector. In one of the interviews, she said, I think it was a lady, that everyone who invests in early stage biotech is by nature an absolute optimist, right? So the reason why we're doing this really is we are a VC. We do multiply, the capital of our LPs, and that is all fine. But the reality of it is that huge portion of it is actually our willingness to support the teams that are capable of bringing something that will make the difference to patients, to the market, right? Because otherwise, this whole exercise doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, you can go into capital markets and then park your money there, or just gamble on stocks and do whatever, right?
Yes.
The whole point of early stage longevity investing and
Yeah.
biotech investing in general is actually generating some sort of impact down the line. Because the reality of the industry is there are always two sides of the river, right? So two shores of the river. One is sometimes geniuses that have invented something but do not have the capital themselves or any other resource themselves to push through all the necessary steps. And then there are people with capital that ideally should spot these geniuses and support them early so that they can work and then they can actually bring something impactful out into the market. So that's that. And we're kind of in the second category as of now, and we try to be as useful as possible.
Nice. So yeah, you are extremely informative, and your questions are very comprehensive. And I very honestly, very genuinely, I can sit here and listen to you talk about this venture capital and longevity like all day. But I know we don't have a lot of time. I don't want to waste too much of your time. So I'll try to ask a couple of my final questions. But one thing you can quickly kind of go over is that what do you think? How do you think AI will? Because AI has become the new the huge thing, and you see a lot of language models. ChatGPT is like has been on the news constantly.
Mm.
How do you think AI? How do you anticipate AI will affect the longevity sector, the research, and the companies. So that's one of the questions that I'm curious about.
Well, look, AI is a bit of a buzzword, right? So like everything that the machine does on itself, people now tend to call AI. But really, what I think where AI has most impact now are a few categories.
Mm-hmm.
First, AI for drug discovery, right? So in silico medicine as a company is a great example of that, right? So instead of 2 years designing a molecule, you can design one in 40 days, right? So and that is and that is tremendously impactful. So you can create drug candidates much faster. You can push them through trials much faster. You can validate them, fail them, etc. So that paves the way to finding drugs to target previously undruggable diseases, right? And iterating on the go.
Mm-hmm.
That is tremendous. And like so in silico now has one of their assets, one of their molecules in phase 2 trials, and they're waiting on efficacy readouts in humans. So
Mm-hmm.
phase 2 is human efficacy, first layer of human efficacy studies. And
Yeah.
a fully AI designed drug that would be efficacious in humans would be, I would honestly compare it to the invention of a light bulb. Like moving from candles to a light bulb in pharma terms, in
Wow.
pharma R&D terms, would be the adequate metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the first impact area. Now the second impact area is, and again, I will not be dropping like exclusive content here. I think it's pretty trivial, but it's AI automating operational stuff that can, for example, increase the actual physician and to patient time, doctor to patient time. And what I mean by that is the recent, like even yesterday, I think Lightspeed Venture Partners and someone else, funded another startup in AI for medical record creation, automation, and kind of, so to automate essentially
Mm-hmm.
the workflow of physicians and staff. And as a result, you kind of tap into the holy problem of any healthcare system, and that is a doctor has 10 to 15 minutes to see the patient. Out of these 15 minutes, 7 minutes or like 10 minutes are spent filling in the
Mm-hmm.
papers, and 5 minutes are spent on the patient. Right.
Yeah.
So if you kind of get rid of that, that would of course improve the quality of healthcare services, and in a way will pave the way to some sort of personalization as well, because more time with patient essentially allows to understand the needs more. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
second part. The third part is using AI as a diagnostic aid. And this has been around for a while now, right? So AI in radiology has been around for a while, and it has proven to be actually more efficient than the human radiologist, right? So in certain cancer areas, in breast cancer detection and certain other tumor type detection, AI aided assists are 99% accurate, for example. So you can rely on AI in finding pathologies, let's say in MRIs and CT scans and whatever, in radiological findings, radiological data. Fourth, again, if we're talking about life sciences, it's I would bet on some sort of treatment insights, right? Where the ability to gather conclusions, patterns, and suggestions based on that pattern. So looking at the history of the patient is also of huge importance, right? And that would also cut a lot of time for the treating physician, right? Where more time can be spent with the patient, and then less time can be spent in actually digging through the papers and trying to understand what sort of personalized picture or personalized treatment there should be. The reason why I'm emphasizing this so much is because so far, when people and I know we're running out of time, but I feel that I need to explain that. So far, when we talk about personalized medicine per
Yeah.
se, we kind of
Yeah.
forget this example of, doctors spending more time on papers than on the patient. So when people say personalized medicine, they immediately, for some reason, a lot of us immediately imagine that, your grandma going to a general hospital would get like a bunch of doctors around her, spending 3 hours understanding how to treat her condition, which is not the case. And the reason why is because healthcare systems, traditional healthcare systems, are basically built as high throughput machines. So, if you can imagine a conveyor belt at a Ford automotive factory, this is pretty much the hospital for you, right? It's protocol based. It's all based on standard SOP, standard operating procedures. It's based on protocols, and the protocols work as, okay, the guy has cancer, do this, 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 this. If this, then this. If this, then that. So it's just like a simple decision tree model. That's it. And the reason why everyone is getting standardized treatment is because there is no way there is no conceivable way to service this many people if you're not like a top-notch private clinic. This many people that sort of maintain that sort of throughput. And exercise any sort of personalization whatsoever, apart from the basic one, right? Where it's like, switching one antibiotic to another because, you have an allergic reaction to the first one type of thing. So AI can mitigate some of these bottlenecks where you can actually delegate by finding certain patterns and highlighting, let's say, certain attention areas that are attributable to the specific patient and his or her, let's say, disease history to the physician, so that these personalization decisions can be made on the go. Because right now, the major bottleneck is, in order to make these personalization decisions, you need to invest time. You need to spend human time, you need to spend specialist time on it, and there is no resources, that's time, right, in this traditional hospital setting. So if you delegate it to someone or something rather, that does it at a good success rate, that can be very helpful.
I see. Again, thank you so much for this answer. Again, I have so many other questions, but I will wrap it up with two final questions because I don't want to waste too much of your time. One,
Sure.
the one, before the last one would be, when I go on YouTube, when I go on internet, I see, especially because whenever something becomes like a hype and trendy, you will see a lot of, more kind of like a general things going on. And you'll see other people like, biohacking, following very strict anti-aging protocols, just doing a bunch of things. And I'm, somebody who's very intimately, involved in that space. In your opinion, how much of it is grounded in reality and how much of it ventures into the space of like science fiction, realm of science fiction?
Yeah, good question. So, and look, I always get the question of what do I do, for example, right? Because people assume that I start my day in a cryo
Yeah.
chamber, and then followed by a cold plunge, and then a bunch of anti-senescence
Yeah. Feels.
pills, right?
Yeah.
Which is very far from reality. Now, when it comes to biohacking, there are the goal is not to overdo it, right? So there are proven methods. Okay, there are proven methods that actually work, and these are super basic lifestyle interventions. Like you don't need a cryo chamber at home, right? And these super basic lifestyle interventions are your diet, really, as stupid as it sounds. They are your diet, it's your exercise regimen, it's routine, right? And then there are more complicated ones such as exposing yourself to a certain amount of cold, for example, etc. That does actually stimulate certain regeneration mechanisms in cells, right? So stuff like that. Am I advocating? Am I telling other people to follow, let's say, Brian Johnson's routine? No. The guy is spending a few $1 million every year on himself, which is not accessible to most humans anyway. And B, he is doing it at an absolute extreme, so he should be perceived as as the
Yeah.
guy who actually tries stuff on himself, so others see how it works. Right, which is a super important role, but it's not for
Yeah.
everyone, right? So it's not like
Yeah.
it should be seamless. My
Yeah,
point
yeah.
is, lifestyle interventions and longevity, they should be seamless. They should not disrupt your actual life, and you should not live for the purpose of doing those, right? It's actually the other way around. Like, they should help you to live
Mhm.
a fuller and like healthier life. So if you take my example
Mhm.
in the account, for example, like I do have a certain history of rare diseases. So let's say, like, on the neurodegenerative side. So my routine, for example, is focused on is focused around or rather is skewed, because I have this health history. But really, it's you just don't use alcohol. Like, you just exclude it out and forget it
Mhm.
exists. Right? You do not smoke.
Mhm.
Smoking is extremely bad. Like, in
Mhm.
any shape or form. You do not inhale burning products whatsoever, right? In any shape or form, right? You exclude things like sugar. For me, excluding dairy has worked wonders.
Mhm.
I don't know why. It might be my personal thing, right? You follow the diet that has a lot of protein, a lot of fiber. Um, a lot of people are talking about eating red meat or not eating red meat. I do not have, like, my own consensus around that. I do, but then again, some people are better off. Some people are better off without it. Um, Gut health for me is
Yeah.
of tremendous importance, and I think that gut is actually at the center of a lot of your problems, ending up with mental health even. Right. That was, by the way, the reason why we invested.
Yeah.
We have our own portfolio company which is called Anybiome. Gut health, like personalized metabolite
Mhm.
based gut
Mhm.
health supplements with clinical data. Check them out. They're pretty cool,
I will.
and I suggest becoming a customer. Right. So that is something that I use, but apart from, and I try to sleep. Right. I try to get
Mhm.
my 7 hours of sleep at least, but that's it,
Mhm.
really. There are
Awesome.
you can go a bit deeper into taking resveratrol, for example, or NMNs, or things like that. But then with NMNs, if you're younger than 40, I would not see how this helps you. Another thing with NMNs is that I still do not understand how they
Mhm.
actually affect the growth of bad cells, of malignant cells, because technically speaking, they should benefit both healthy cells and malignant cells, because there is no differentiation once they get into your system. So if you have something growing slow, the risk is to accelerate the growth, really. So that is an answer for me. Resveratrol is good for you. Resveratrol, by the way,
Mhm.
is like this only healthy component in wine that people are ranting about, right? That like, if you've heard that wine is good for you, this is, like, presumably because of resveratrol, but in
Mhm.
reality, any alcohol content is bad. And if you want the good part of wine, you just buy resveratrol at your pharmacy,
Mhm.
and you just take it in pills, and then this is how you get this acid in. That's it. So yeah, stuff like that. But my point is, do not go into extreme. Maintain a healthy exercise routine, and that
Mhm.
means you need to have at least 3 days a week of aerobic, like essentially mixed aerobic and anaerobic exercise, right? And if you are a male, you actually need to do physical exercises, right? And this is where I am heavily biased towards calisthenics, which is not your gym going type of routine and squats and all that stuff, right? But rather exercises that engage your core and engage
Yeah.
your own weight. And if you try those, you will soon realize that this
Yeah.
is much, much, much more complicated than going to the gym. But yeah, that's it. But don't overdo it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my biggest
Yeah.
message here.
No, thank you so much. I mean, calisthenics, I agree. Growing up in Azerbaijan, especially when I was a kid, there weren't like a lot of gyms where I was growing up, but we had pull-up bars literally everywhere. So I also started with
There you
calisthenics.
go.
I guess my last question would be, what advice would you offer to entrepreneurs or scientists aspiring to make their mark in longevity sector or trying to get into the longevity sector as an entrepreneur or maybe, like in any capacity, really?
Before I answer that question, there is something that I want to add to the previous one. Regardless of your
Yeah.
age, or rather, once you're 30, you should do it. So after you're 30, regardless of how good you feel, do checkups every year, like just routinely, for the purpose of not
Mm-hmm.
finding anything, right? But
Mm-hmm.
we as a a pool of knowledge as a society, I mean, we're quite good at finding these diseases and stuff that can kill you prematurely early. We're actually quite good at it. The problem is you need to search for them in order to find them. So search for them routinely, and
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
happy if you haven't found anything,
Yeah.
but just make it a habit. If you have female
Yeah.
family members, uh, force them into breast cancer screening, force them into the older they become, force them into checkups, etc. Like, because you really can't prevent a lot of things until it's too late, right? And then you will be sorry that you didn't. So
Exactly.
that's that's
Very true.
the follow up for the previous one. Um, the advice I want to give to entrepreneurs that want to start in this space, honestly, Javid, I don't have one. To be frank with you, right? So we starting like a biotech company right off the bat. So like waking up in the morning and saying I want to start an AI for drug discovery company, most probably will not gonna work, right? Because it's highly specific. If you
Yeah.
are interested
Yeah.
in biotech space, though, if you are interested in biotech space, and if you are interested in the VC side of it or the entrepreneurial side of it, the best way of trying to approach it is through internships, essentially, or through super junior positions in either startups of your interest, which do not require super specific technical knowledge yet, but you'll get it on the go. Again, half a year you'll be a specialist in the area if you work in it, or join a VC as a junior analyst, junior intern, assistant to the junior intern, whatever that is. But like you really need to get your hands somewhere that where stuff happens, right? And it's I think it's joining as a junior in any of those areas. And then as you go, understanding whether this is for you, whether this is not for you, and trying to grasp the whole landscape, and maybe then arrive at an idea of what you want to do as an entrepreneur. But I would start by joining someone else. That would be my take.
Okay. Okay. Well, Sergey, again, thank you so much. It was extremely informative, at least for me. I will probably watch this episode once again just to fully absorb everything you said. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. And I really hope we can stay in touch.
Likewise, I'm happy to follow up. Happy to have another conversation. I'm always open to talk more. If it helps anyone to become a fan of longevity and the industry itself, and kind of
Okay,
grasp the magnitude of the problem we were trying to solve, I'm happy to do so.
great. Thank you so much again. And you have a fantastic day, all right?
Thank you, Javid.